you for everyone joining today's webinar. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Bill.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks for joining the monthly HBK Risk Advisory webinar series. I'd like to start off today just by wishing everyone a happy Thanksgiving tomorrow. This is officially Thanksgiving Eve. So if you've been on our webinars before, this might be a little bit boring on my intro because I do it every month, but I'm Bill Heaven. I'm a Senior Director with our HBK Risk Advisory Services. And this afternoon, we have a very interesting topic to discuss with you all, which is the topic of data loss prevention, otherwise known as DLP. Next slide. Okay, so just to get a few housekeeping issues out of the way, this is the standard thing that we do. So you're going to be able to get an hour of continuing professional education or CPE, but in order to do that, you're going to have to stay online for the entire hour presentation and answer 4 context-sensitive questions that are just going to pop up. It shouldn't be too difficult. And then the last question is, do you want to receive CPE? So we've eliminated the thing that you have to send us an email and request it. Just answer that last question, yes, you want CPE, and we'll take care of the rest, assuming that you are online for the first 3. And then our goal is to leave 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the presentation to answer any questions, but you can go ahead and queue those questions up ahead of time. If you think of something when we're talking about something, just send us a question. Additionally, we put a PDF copy of today's slide deck in the message control center. And if you run into any issues, you can send us a chat message in that because we're monitoring the control center and we can try to address any issues that you're having. And then lastly, we're going to make a recording available of today's webinar, and we'll send that out for the people that registered for this webinar, and then we'll just give them an email later. Probably with the holiday, it'll probably come out early next week. With that, we'll move on to our next slide, which will discuss some of the today's learning objectives.
Yeah.
All right. So with the CPE, I'm not going to get, you can read the slides, but these are the learning objectives, which are what were the goal of our presentation today, to make sure that these should be viewed as kind of like the takeaways that a participant should be able to achieve by attending this webinar. So the 5 learning objectives, which are the same as what we sent out in the agenda, and this is what it should be, a pretty good presentation. And then at the end, this is what you'll be able to have picked up from attending the session. So we can move on to the next slide. Okay, and myself, like I said, I've been I do these once a month. I've been with HBK since the summer of 2018. I do both internal and external responsibilities here at HBK. So in addition to doing our internal IT security functions, I do some outreach and work with clients and help them with some of their IT security issues. And then I'm going to introduce our speaker today, Yasir Ali, who's you can go ahead and put on the next slide. So Yasir is he's the CEO and founder of Polymer. And Yasir, is there anything else that you'd like to just say and introduce yourself before we dive into the first topic?
Yeah, no, really excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Bill and Michelle. Hello to everyone. Happy Thanksgiving.
Great. All right. So then we can we'll go to the next slide and introduce our first agenda item. And we'll get started and talk about some of the risks when you have talking about data loss prevention, and start off on the logical first topic of the risk of that data exfiltration and leakage out of your organization. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Yasir, and have fun. Let's learn some stuff about DLP.
Great. No, thanks for having me. kind of starting off with the risk of data exfiltration and leakage. Let me kind of start with a topic which is very front and center in everyone's mind in terms of cyber readiness. Ransomware, cyber attacks used to be the purview for very large businesses. And what we are seeing in the recent past, even mid-sized businesses are being attacked. If anything, the attackers are finding more vulnerabilities or easier to infiltrate and steal and lock data from mid-sized businesses. And this has kind of changed the game as it stands starting 2021 in terms of what it means to protect your data, what it means to be having a cyber security posture which is resilient and capable of surviving an attack and be able to have data which survives one of these kind of blast radiuses. So this is a very clear and present danger. It's no longer nice to have to think about data security, data governance, but any data governance program, as we'll go in the next few slides, has direct implications on the bottom line of businesses. Obviously there's a bunch of macro themes which are taking place in the marketplace right now. Post-COVID, remote work has accelerated the journey to SaaS and the cloud, as Nadella of Microsoft CEO said. 10 years worth of digitization has occurred in like less than 1 year. And what that is translating into a faster adoption of the cloud, a much faster ramp up of not building in-house applications, but taking advantage of SaaS platforms and applications for lease or for rent, which are available in the marketplace right now to solve some of these issues. And that is essentially making your boundary or your parameter of what your domain is changing. It's no longer an on-prem solution. You have a server or rack space sitting in one of the closets or your data room locked with a key. These things are sitting on the cloud now, public clouds. A lot of your processing is happening on the public clouds. Your Microsoft Office, for example, is sitting on Office 365, all as a subscription basis. So the proverbial perimeter of what technology assets are is changing, where the world where it was nice round corners around this is my environment and anything outside of this is external used to be very clear and for most organizations. And post-COVID, the world is looking a little bit more complicated, where a lot of applications we're subscribing to or using in the environment or looking to use either are sitting on a public cloud or they are sitting with the vendors themselves. And this diagram kind of shows the proliferation of shadow IT, which used to be a much smaller component of the overall security landscape, and which is no longer the case currently. Bill, I think this is the poll question 1.
Right, and for those of you that want to get the CP for today, Michelle has loaded the first poll question on there. So we're ready for you to go ahead and answer those poll questions. So Michelle, keep an eye on that and let me know when we're ready to move on. Okay, so that's the first poll question. One of the things that I was just thinking about, Yasir, is Is it, you were talking about shadow IT. What are companies doing to try to manage shadow IT now?
I think that's a pretty moving target right now. Historically, you basically try to limit the number of exchanges of data over these platforms which were not sitting on-prem. That definition now is becoming less, it's more shaky now, because most of these platforms, for example, OneDrives of the world or the Google Drive, or platforms like Microsoft Teams, Box, or GitHub, since you're doing a lot of your workflows over these platforms, is becoming a very challenging problem, and we will dissect some of those challenges in the next few slides, because that exactly is where some of the data governance risks are arising right now for most companies. Kind of, when I lay out the perspective of data governance, it means different things to different people. But let's kind of, for the purposes of this presentation, let's talk about data governance as a concept. So data governance, in the simplicity, is just understanding what your sensitive data is and where it resides, and how best to be able to control that data. And that's kind of the very lightweight definition of data governance. But what we will try to prove out here in the next few slides is data governance is the foundation of a good information security program. And it's actually can put you in a very good spot of becoming a secure organization, be it a small team or a very large organization. One of the areas which is demanding data governance to become front and center cause for attention is the global privacy laws. It started off with GDPR, whose principles were based on the idea that a consumer has rights over his data, which is stored or hosted by a company. And that basic data right tenet is the foundation for all global privacy laws that have since have come up or are going to be coming up in the future. So CCPA out of California is a big one, India, Brazil, and then there's like at least 100 other global privacy laws and state regulations around privacy, which are coming into play, having that same basic principle. And one of the basic tenets of GDPR, which we expect to see is happening a little bit in CCPA and other privacy laws, is the idea of a data subject requesting to know what data is held by the organization for that consumer. And secondly, can request deletion of that data by the company within 30 days. So right to deletion, right to access are two of the basic tenets of these global privacy programs, which we expect to become more and more common.
Yeah, that's a good point with the privacy laws. So even though some of the privacy regulation that Yasir talked about were international, it does come back to the U.S. As a matter of fact, I received one of these from someone that we had contacted with at HBK, and they said I got this request from them to formally remove all of their information. So that this does happen. And so Yasir, can you comment on what some of the challenges that companies are dealing with trying to comply with all these different regulatory laws?
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. So this is becoming a big problem for the large organizations, of course, because the customer data can be sitting in multiple different platforms. A customer data could be used in other applications. where the data got changed. So, for example, your address information could be sitting in a CRM platform, which is a sales platform, or it could be sitting in a reporting system where you're creating reports off of the same data for use by the analytics team. So one of the challenges is obviously knowing and mapping out where this data is found and how it's being used. And the other area which is becoming a challenge is data retention. They used to be in a days that keep the data forever, or in financial services, because of FINRA, OCC, and the Fed requiring banks to hold records for 7 years, there has been a tradition of storing data for as long as possible, which is an idea that should be challenged, because the more data you retain, the higher the risk of exfiltration will be. And so removing that footprint is probably the first and foremost point. But again, mapping exercise of your data and where things sit and how it's being used is the first order priority, which if you don't do it early enough, or it could be a big intractable problem that could span into a multi-year project for a company of any meaningful size.
Yeah, that's a good point, because if you're not prepared for that, because like what Yasir said, you have these time limits running. So if you need to be, ready to go with that type of stuff, because you never know when you're going to be presented with it. But, if your time limit is running, like you have your 30 or 45 days or whatever it is based on the different privacy regulation, you could be eating up a lot of that time just trying to figure out where you have to remove a person's data from. So it does make sense to, do that stuff up front.
And it's not one of the challenges in implementing these programs is, you would basically put a compliance person in charge of it, or have someone in the data governance or your data team in charge of this data. But it really is a multi-group, multi-domain problem, or multi-domain within the organization. Different groups need to work together to be able to kind of achieve these goals. So if there's a product update coming up, or you're selling, you have a marketing program which is being launched, all those things require a certain amount of data as an input, and being in sync in terms of how that data is used, maybe using a checklist which can allow you to check for what customer data is being used, how is it being used, and where is it being stored. Like a simple 3-pointer checklist could be enough to at least start keeping audit trails of any major changes in your organization's product suite. You can always go back to as needed to be able to at least get something going from a data governance angle. Otherwise, if you try to do it after the fact, then it's a much difficult exercise in terms of keeping a good handle on this data, or maintaining a data governance program once you kind of go through the exercise. The other angle from a data governance side, which dovetails into the last point, is cyber insurance market is becoming a tale of two worlds, where it's for very large companies, it's easy enough to get the cyber insurance. For mid-sized businesses, though, either it's too expensive, or you get some very limited amount of coverage for the amount of money you're putting in it. And what we are seeing in the market right now is any breach, any leakage of data, even customer data accidentally leaked by an employee, can prohibit the company from getting cyber insurance for some amount of time. So it's becoming, because the cyber insurance market is broken, the premium rates are going up this year based on unprecedented level of attacks and ransomwares. This has direct implication on your insurance premiums, and and demonstrating good data controls is a very effective way of showing any insurance provider that you take this seriously and be able to even reduce your premiums if you're able to demonstrate that you have good data controls. And we have seen that work in the market for a number of companies.
I mean, I would concur with that wholeheartedly. I know that, with, some of the stuff that I've done, we had to prove to when we did our renewal, we had to prove that we had some of these things in place. But so do you anticipate, is that where you see the future of cyber insurance going, or what are your thoughts for what the future holds for us on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, the future of cyber insurance and SOC in general, we are basically heading towards a direction where it's not going to be a checklist, or it's not going to be a self-assessment. We feel that the direction the market is going towards is trust but verify, where you will need to be installing or demonstrating automated controls within your tech stack to show that you have these controls working, whatever you've certified to. And we see that in cyber insurance, where let's say, simple example, your firewall is at the latest version. It is able to kind of like be able to have all the patches. And if it's not, and a program can monitor that, if it's not, then your cyber insurance goes up. So as long as you keep your defensive capabilities in line or current, then your premiums stay the same. So that's the direction the market is going towards, and we see no way around it, especially for companies who are actually implementing these, and they want to kind of take credit for by reduced premiums in being able to show insurance companies that even if there was a breach, the blast radius of that breach was low, and they were able to have controls which reduce the amount of damage done to them. And
so is that, I know before you move over to the next slide, is that just basically because of what we just experienced over the end of 2020 and then earlier in this year, where, we had solar winds, and we had Colonial Pipeline, and we had the meat packing plant. It seemed like every month there was another major cyber breach. Do you think that's what just kind of put this into this future state where you're, trust but verify? Is that where it came from?
Yes, that's definitely moving and pushing the market in that direction for sure. Yes, where
okay.
A lot of these technology assets used by companies were outdated. They were not patched up, and leaving those kind of open vulnerabilities is a big no-no, which is easy to kind of monitor and be up to date with.
Good. Yeah, I just want, whenever I get somebody that has like the experience like Yasir has, I always like to take advantage and ask him some questions. So I'll quiet down here for you, Yasir, and let you go on with your presentation.
No issues. Great questions. Keep them coming. We've been using the word sensitive data a lot. So just to kind of define what sensitive data is, under most regulatory regimes. So PHI, health information, identifiable information, which is PII, PCI. But basically, they take forms which are very similar to each other. You're looking at HIPAA versus GDPR. The overlap is like pretty much like 80-90% in terms of what those sensitive data elements are. You have any information that can tie back. I have a small spell check here, got cut out, but any kind of data which ties your customer or your patient, and you can identify that patient or that customer with, is considered to be sensitive. So maybe ICD-9, ICD-10, these are medical labels that might not be relevant in identifying a patient because these are common lexicons. But if a patient's name is found or a correct SSN number is found along with ICD-9, then that linkage is created where if those two pieces of information get leaked, then you can essentially know the patient's diagnostic, what afflicts this person, and that's kind of where the privacy laws and some of these data breaches start becoming an issue. So we see a lot of these breaches happen with just the name of the person as part of the data set which got leaked. But typically the more damaging ones where the regulators and the state regulators charge you much higher fine is when it's accompanied by some of the other identifiers such as like passport numbers or Medicare ID and SSNs and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, so now we're gonna, for those of you on today's webinar that want to get CPE, here's your second poll question. So I see Michelle's loaded the poll up there for us, so we'll take a pause here to let you answer that question. So Michelle, when you be the judge. All right. So I see that we're answering that. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, and I'll ask Yasir to talk a little bit about sensitive data and how it relates to software as a service applications. So
perfect.
Take it away, Yasir.
Perfect. Yeah. So sensitive data in SaaS applications is an area which is becoming a big pain point. The reason being, historically, on an on-prem application install, you were able to give as an admin access to people to allow to gain access to a SharePoint file, for example, or a folder. In SaaS platforms, the way the work is done is you want as many people using that platform at the same time to collaborate and share. And this is kind of where some of the sharing of data becomes very easy. And the controls which you had on-prem applications is just no longer possible by default in these SaaS applications. And when we say SaaS, these are just a subset of some examples, but there could be chat platforms like Slack and Teams, ticketing systems like Jira, Intercom, storage systems, obviously, which are sitting on the cloud, like Box, Google Drive, OneDrive, email, obviously, and then code bases, GitLab, GitHub. So all these applications, there's a big component of collaboration and information sharing between individuals of the company or external to the company. And we see a trend, especially for mid-sized businesses, is where you can log into these applications through your mobile device, through a non-secure channel, and making it easy for anyone to kind of log in, download files locally, maybe be on a unsecured Wi-Fi. And this is kind of where some of the challenges start arising in terms of the data governance component of how secure is your sensitive data over these platforms. And the classic example I like to kind of give is someone shares a file over a chat platform. In one example, a person, Sharon, downloads that file locally, which is sitting with an unsecured Wi-Fi, or a kid uses the computer which has a potential malware that could be inserted into the computer. And certainly that data can be exposed, right? Like the risk increases of the exfiltration of that thing. And you're sharing a file externally to a partner who gets breached, for example. There's like multiple different components where the pattern of how work is being done is evolving using these SaaS platforms. And this is kind of where some of the risks are new and uncharted over these platforms. And if you have in the organization companies using Office 365 or Exchange in some cases, or Gmail, how much control, or do you even know how much sensitive data is being trafficked over over a given platform? Who's sharing it? Who is transacting in it? Who's downloading it? Who's opening these files? There's very little visibility into usage of your company's sensitive data over these platforms, and which we think is the main problem. Plug in here for us. I mean, this is kind of what we live for. The Polymer is a data loss prevention for SaaS platforms, and we are trying to attack this problem, which we think is a very pressing danger from a data governance angle, in terms of how to take back control of your data over these platforms. So, before I kind of jump into the Polymer thing, there's a poll question here, Bill.
Okay. Sorry, I was on mute there, everyone. But so here's your third poll question that Michelle has loaded up there.
Okay.
And then go ahead and advance to the next slide, and then we'll go on to our demo of Polymer, and I'll turn that back over to you, Yasir.
Perfect. So we'll just do a quick 10-minute kind of walkthrough of trying to define in terms of what the platform does and how that relates into data governance. So I am going to just run this recording for 10 minutes, and I'll jump right back in after this.
Okay, great.
This is the Polymer website. Polymer offers a couple of different types of products. One is the Polymer VCO, where you have the option of installing directly in some of the platforms we have made available for free. We have other integrations that you can access by talking to us. And then we have the Polymer Security Scan, which is essentially a way to get an assessment done in terms of what is your privacy and risk profile. So you have a report, which basically, this is just a version of the report that is static, but you get a interactive report in an email where you can see what sensitive data have been used, who's using them, what are the risks, what are the third-party apps installed over your platform. So a nifty, very easy assessment to do. And just so I don't forget, the Polymer VCO, our flagship product, also should be able to be installed in less than 60 seconds in any of the platforms we have made available. So Polymer, in a nutshell, is doing, first of all, a fully autonomous data mapping exercise to baseline the traffic which is passing through your different platforms. Over here, we see an example only with Slack, who are the different users using these platforms, and then be able to essentially see what kind of policies are available and how the trend of this data has been. So this is just the first part of understanding the overall view of how these different within your rule set, what are the different types of entities or sensitive data are available you can select from, or the system will be monitoring these things directly. The way the system works is essentially in different platforms, it's taking action, it's keeping an eye on to what traffic is moving over these platforms, and be able to essentially also take remediative actions within any of these different platforms. And some of these platforms in this example could be, there's a few available here, but the idea basically is that you can create rules which can allow you to automate your data governance program. So if, for example, you have users sharing files which have sensitive data externally, you can disallow them or expire the links within a certain amount of time. And if there's some internal sharing going on, you can also kind of have some rule set. So every platform we connect into, we can essentially allow different types of permissionings approved. So you can, in the code bases or ticketing system, you can redact out tickets or not even let the code base approve if it doesn't function. The other thing, before I kind of jump into a quick demo, is to look at the security policies. So out of the box, you have most of the global privacy policies available to you in terms of plug and play. This is an example of HIPAA policy where just with a toggle on and off, you should be able to create what entities are sensitive to you and be able to apply them across all your platforms, all your SaaS platforms in real time. You can create your own rules. You can do a bunch of different things in terms of really being specific around what you consider to be controlled data or data which, if it leaks, could have damaging effect to your organization. There's a bunch of other dials available to be able to allow certain users to have access to this. So you're not being overly whelmed by the alerts coming in if they're not particularly alerts. So for example, the example I like to give is if there is sensitive data which is okay for a compliance team to see, if they have access to a folder and no one else, then our platform is not going to alert that to be a risk. However, if that data, someone has access to that file, to that environment, then those events would be considered to be sensitive. So we have a bunch of other things in here. Without further ado, I just want to kind of, based on the rules that was set up, let me kind of jump into a quick demo here in terms of what that means. So let's say you define sensitive data to be social security number. Here is the ID. You have certain patterns which are found in here. And basically the idea is if there is sensitive data found, it goes out and redacts it. And depending on who needs to access it, they can unlock those different contents. Now, let's say you are sharing a file. Here is the doc, which has some sensitive data in there. So this is the file which was shared, which had, this is a scanned PDF having sensitive data elements like organization name, address information, Facebook secret keys in there, and so on and so forth. So when the chart was sent out, basically the message got redacted. Let me just show you what that redacted message looks like. So anytime that's the definition of your organization sensitive data was found, it goes and redacts that thing out within any kind of data set. And depending on your permissions, you can request access to it and unlock certain aspects of that data for usage for that individual who has access to it. For example, in this case, this individual looked at this file and he was able to unlock organization name, but not unlock the address information, or he was able to unlock the social security number, for example. So this is just a very simple example in terms of how that kind of flows in. Now let's say you are sharing here's the invoice. So this invoice, for example, has some amount of PHI data in them, billing address, name, some registration number, PAN number in there. And the machine can basically take a bunch of things. It can either just monitor this event happening, or it can essentially go out and redact that piece of the information in real time. In this case, anything defined by the organization to be sensitive was redacted, and then the user can unlock the content, or someone in the chat or someone in the environment can unlock those contents and be able to unredact pieces of that document that person should have access to. So he was able to unlock the name, but not the address, for example, in this case, or order number, but not the full amount of details. So this is kind of like the, the same thing can be applied for different types of, ID cards, so on and so forth. There's a bunch of, here is the ID. So there's a bunch of different things that could be applied, and depending on the rules that can be configured. So let me kind of stop the screen demo, and then what's happening throughout this whole thing is the all of these events which are taking place in any of your different platforms, no matter where they are being logged. These events can be tracked, audited, what kind of information is being shared, who's sharing them, and so on and so forth. So this is the control mechanism, a data governance, which is out of the box, and then real-time remediation of these events to reduce the amount of surface area of essentially sensitive data over these platforms. There's a bunch of other reports available to be able to see who the users are. You can even create automated workflows to send them training materials, people who are flagrant in terms of sharing information, who are the people sharing the most information. So we just want to start locking down any of your shadow IT environments as they are occurring within your SaaS platforms, and make them HIPAA compliant, GDPR compliant, CCT compliant, or just internally compliant for your data governance, program success, and your cyber posture in your organization. This is Yasir, founder of Polymer. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Okay, so feel free to ask any questions on that. The demo was done on Slack platform, but that could be it's a similar type of pattern for other platforms like Microsoft Teams, OneDrive, and so on and so forth. So happy to discuss that in more detail if someone has any other questions on that.
So that's pretty interesting, Yasir. That's the first time I've seen your product demoed, and I can say from my experience that that would be very, that's very practical and valuable, because prior to coming to HBK, I worked for a large global manufacturer, and we would get requests from clients or basically customers that would say, "Hey, I want to know about everything you were talking about in your instant messaging system," and that. So you actually have the ability to protect companies in that. So that's really cool. That's a great product there. I do have a couple questions that popped in. People are asking, like, is it possible for people to try out the product on like a trial basis?
Yeah, so www.polymerhq.io. It's pretty easy to install. Start using it. You can use the scanner. You can use the full VCO product also, which is the more block and tackle. And it usually takes about a minute to get set up on any of the platforms. So if you just set up a time with us, so over a 15-minute phone call, we can kind of jumpstart anyone on a data governance journey as needed.
That's good. So it's not a huge time investment there. How about as far as like level of effort? A lot of times you see these tools, but they take a lot of manpower to keep them running. But so could like a one-person team do this, or a small compliance team, use the Polymer solution?
Yeah, I mean, it's we have customers ranging from a 5-person company to a 31,000 person company. So we think the approach we have taken is towards a more autonomous security, autonomous data governance, where no one should be babysitting the data governance program. It should be all automated, and this is our attempt to do that. So highly autonomous, where small teams with no technical staff even could potentially run this and use it to derive value, for sure.
Great.
Okay. So in summary, what does a secure technology stack look like? These are some very high-level points here, but a takeaway from the webinar today needs to be is reducing the surface area of your attacks, of potential attacks, and that basically means removing sensitive data in environments where they don't need to be there. Public environments, meaning where a lot of people have access to the environment. So if someone is able to access an organization through an employee credentials, removing that amount of surface area can be crucial in having a $1 million ransomware to like $100,000 ransomware, like for example damage. So these are just very basic data hygienes that could be really save your bacon one day. And then data governance around visibility into sensitive data, because when you start thinking about cybersecurity programs, having that knowledge is crucial in terms of where, how do you design access permissions, how do you design training, how do you design operational workflows, and that visibility is hugely crucial. And lastly, this is talking our own book here, but autonomous security, like you cannot manually be looking at these risks on a day-to-day basis. You need to think about automating a lot of these things, or looking at products and tools out there in the marketplace which could do that, or leveraging MSSP services that could help you do that if you have the if you don't have the bandwidth to do it internally. And it's a company-wide cultural issue to be able to have a good data governance program. Not one person, no compliance manager can sit there and tell the company or the board that we want to implement data governance. This needs to be everyone in the team, everyone in the organization taking part, and personally ensuring that whatever the data they are privy to, they're protecting, they're keeping high standards in terms of how they share this information. So training, accountability, and trust around data privacy, data security is a must if you want to have a scalable program that can kind of outlast a one-person team or a small team out there. So I think that's a wrap. Bill, I will hand it over to you.
Great. That's some awesome information that you provided, Yasir. Thank you very much for joining us today, and great perspective. I think we have one more poll question that's up on the screen for our participants. So this is the one I was talking about, the most difficult one in the deck, where you just have to tell us if you want CP or not. So Michelle, you can let me know when people have done that, and okay, and then we'll just wrap up here. So like I said, hopefully you found today's presentation very worthwhile and informative. I know I certainly did, and so I think we've learned quite a bit about data loss prevention. If you have any questions, Yasir, go ahead and flip it to the next slide, and it'll have our contact information up there. One more. So if you have any questions, feel free to follow up directly with Yasir, or you can follow up with me, and I'll make sure I get a question on to Yasir. But again, that was great information. And Michelle, have we got any questions that have come in that we need to tee up for either myself or Yasir?
Yes, we did have a couple that came in. The first one is, how can compliance, IT, and security work together effectively?
You want to take that one, Yasir?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it starts off with having common outcomes you want to achieve, and that comes from the business itself. So keeping information secure could be one entry into your end goal you want to kind of get to, and your security functions and security outcomes could define. But coming up with those common denominators of what the end goals are hugely important, and then tying any of your initiatives in the organization to those high-level outcomes you want to target is the common denominator. Otherwise, you'll have compliance team talk in compliance language and security team talking in security language, and you don't get anywhere. So we feel that's a crucial starting point. And then obviously working together around or having a say in around any major initiatives that do take place from both the parties with the business kind of involvement is actually a pretty good way to kind of sustain that.
Okay, thank you, Yasir. Michelle, any other questions? Looks like we have a couple minutes left here, but so do we have any other ones in the queue there?
Yes. The next one is, what would HBK suggest to help a company get started with DLP?
Sure. So what you want to keep in mind there is, it's a matter of understanding what you have and what you need to protect. So obviously a fundamental step would be to make sure you understand your IT related assets, because, like Yasir just demonstrated here with the Polymer solution, you've got these SaaS solutions out there that are, people are sharing data with. So you have to understand what kind of data is available within your organization. And, so if you have some type of inventory that tells you that, then you can do your risk assessment and risk rank things and say that, this is a very important chunk of data that I have to worry about, so that I'll, then maybe it's the thing that we have to contact Polymer and get their solution to keep from, but it all comes down to that risk rank analysis. So, but you have to start out by knowing what you have and then be able to prioritize what you need to protect through a risk assessment. So that would be my suggestion on how to get started with DLP. Any other questions?
Yeah, we had one more that just came in. What are the challenges of current IT security tools?
That one seems like a good one for you, Yasir.
Yeah, sure. It's the products in general, unfortunately, in the cyber market are very technical and expensive to maintain. They're built for either involving consulting firms to install and run, or MSSPs, or requiring large technology teams to be able to kind of internal teams to manage. And that's been the issue with most cybersecurity tools out there in the marketplace for mid-sized businesses specifically, where even after you kind of get that over the ramp of installing that thing, it's hard to maintain, where the human loop makes it very expensive to maintain. You are unable to find enough qualified people in the marketplace right now to manage SOC programs, and especially for companies whose tech stack is pretty simple, who don't ever had a need for having security officers or very large technology teams, are certainly having to kind of scramble to find that skill set, either externally or hire, which is, and then you're trying to look for the specific kind of skill set which everyone else is looking for. So keeping it simple is the approach we like to kind of recommend. I know it's difficult, but if it's requiring a consulting firm to install it and run it for you, then you will be needing the consulting firm to manage it forever. So just know exactly what you're getting into in terms of how you go about implementing a program or architecting a program.
Okay, that's great. That's good advice. So again, I want to thank Yasir. It's always a privilege to be able to get somebody to help us out on these webinars, especially someone with Yasir's expertise. So again, I hope everybody found today's webinar as interesting as I did. And again, I want to thank Yasir. To our general audience, again, since we are on Thanksgiving Eve, I want to wish everybody not only a safe but a healthy Thanksgiving with your friends and family. And this is going to be our last webinar of the calendar year, so we won't be having one in December due to the Christmas holiday. But if you're going to want to mark a date on your calendar for January 26th, we'll be starting up again with our risk advisory webinar series on risk, and so we have a great guest lined up for that presentation on the 26th of January. So we'll get those inventories out, or those invites out after the first of the year. I got myself thinking inventory about risk, but so we'll get those invites out to you. And again, have a great Thanksgiving, and thanks, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.